pretty critical of Joe Biden's cabinet picks. However, the person he has chosen to head the Department of Health and Human Services seems pretty cool. Xavier Becerra is his name, and he's the current attorney general in the state of California. And what is promising about Becerra is his record on healthcare, Social Security, and his refusal to support permanent tax cuts for the wealthy. So Becerra is a supporter of Medicare for all. He's been on the record, and he also demanded during the Obama administration that he take tough action against the pharmaceutical industry in order to lower drug prices. So as recently as 2017, Becerra declared, quote, "I've been a supporter of Medicare for all for the 24 years that I was in Congress." And he said that he would fight to create such a system in California where it was considered in the legislature. As HHS secretary, Becerra would be in a position to facilitate states' waivers to make it easier for states to create Medicare for all systems. So that's definitely a positive, that's promising news. I also want to note that in 2016, he was one of the in 2016, he was one of the 51 House Democrats who signed a letter calling on Obama or Obama's HHS secretary at the time to use something known as march-in rights to rescind exclusive patents for medicines whose research that we, the taxpayers, actually funded through research and development grants. And so just to go back a little bit to give you more context, during the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton gave a huge gift to the pharmaceutical companies and lobbyists in 2016 when he repealed a rule requiring that those medicines be offered to consumers at a reasonable price, okay? So that did some significant damage. And the one loophole to it was this whole notion of march-in rights where the federal government can say, hey, yo, pharmaceutical company, we funded the research and development of this drug. You now cannot turn around and price gouge American citizens, right? And so Becerra really wanted the HHS secretary under Obama to implement that loophole, but of course that did not happen. Now, at the time, Becerra said this: "The failure to act in the past has undoubtedly sent an unfortunate signal that prices for federally funded inventions can be set as high as a sick or dying consumer will pay." And then one other thing that's worth mentioning this year, something more current, Becerra was one of 34 state attorneys general to sign a letter demanding that federal government use march-in rights to make the early onset COVID treatment remdesivir, whose research and development was sponsored by the government, more widely available and affordable to all. And I have other good news regarding Becerra's record. So I'll get to that in just a second, but first, Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of points here. First of all, they might be moving him out so that so he doesn't run for the Senate seat that's going to come up for when Kamala Harris becomes VP. There's been rumors in California for a long time that there was some sort of backroom deal where he was set to run for the Senate. And they were going to clear the slate for him. And in California, when the Democratic Party decides to clear a slate, they do. But Health and Human Services is a great job. So putting him in a cabinet position in the middle of a pandemic like that, I'll take it. And so you never know if he's going to win the Senate seat or not. But him actually having a chance to have an effect, especially on issues that he has been great about in the past, that's a big win. So Xavier Becerra is not known as a big progressive, but his actions have actually shown on critical issues, especially the issue of healthcare, that he has acted like one. And so great, that's wonderful. So sometimes reporters, corporate Democrats, and sometimes even the audience has trouble understanding where progressives come from and where the Young Turks come from, et cetera. They're like, well, I don't get it. You don't seem to be in any of these camps. Or sometimes you're criticizing cabinet picks of Biden, and sometimes you're praising him. In this story, you told us that Bill Clinton did something terrible, but now you're praising Democrat Xavier Becerra. So why? So let me decipher it for you, because our media in this country is so incredibly biased in different directions. Mainstream media biased in favor of corporate Democrats mainly, but also corporate Republicans. And the right wing completely in favor of Trump and Republicans. We actually care about policy. It's so sad that that's rare and that like we have to explain that to you. Everyone should care about policy if they're in politics, but almost all of them care about what's my tribe, what's my status, etc. So the reality is some of Biden's picks have been bad to disastrous. This was a really good one. So we support him, not because we're on any team, but because Becerra has good policies and we'd love to have him head HHS.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's purely based on policies, as you know has been mentioned before. The Democratic Party really has two different parties within it, and we're on the left. And so I care about Medicare for all. I care about protecting Social Security from the cuts that Republicans and some Democrats have been fighting for. And this is also good news when you consider who the Biden campaign wanted to install in this position in the first place. Originally, it was going to be Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo, but she actually abruptly dropped out of consideration after it was revealed that she had made a deal with healthcare lobbyists to push for immunity for nursing home corporations during coronavirus. As we know, there's been some malpractice in some of these facilities, and many elderly people have died from the pandemic as a result of that. But I do want to give you a few other examples of what I've seen from Becerra that I like. So sticking to the topic of healthcare, he's actually sued healthcare companies or hospitals, I should say, that engaged in behavior that was pretty damaging to patients and consumers. His office sued Sutter Health, the largest hospital system in Northern California, over anti-competitive behavior. The behavior allegedly included all or nothing agreements in which insurers had to include all of Sutter's medical facilities within their networks if they wanted to contract with Sutter at all. Last December, the health system agreed to pay $575 million to settle the claims. It also prohibited engaging in several practices the Attorney General's office and others said the hospital system used to gain undue influence and hurt patients, including limiting what it can charge them for out-of-network services. And then when it comes to the topic of tax cuts, right? I feel like tax cuts tend to be like the one issue where Democrats might like kind of say they're against tax cuts for the wealthy, But Becerra talks the talk. Back in 2012, when the Obama administration was considering making the Bush era tax cuts permanent for the wealthy, Becerra actually went on the House floor and argued against that. And we have that example for you. Take a look.
When the Wall Street banking crisis of 2008 hit, causing the worst recession since the Great Depression, it was the middle class that took it on the chin. More than 8 million Americans lost their job through no fault of their own. And as millions of Americans were losing their jobs and their homes, the big banks received bailouts and CEOs continued to receive million-dollar payouts. While too many middle-class Americans are still out looking for work, this Congress is voting again to give over $160,000 a year in tax breaks to the richest 2% of Americans, while the average American will be lucky to get about 1/100th or maybe 1 or 2/100ths of that amount. Can anyone in this chamber blame the middle class for thinking the system is rigged against them? Mr. Speaker, we all admire financial success, but when we give away trillions in tax cuts that we cannot afford to those who need them the least, it's the middle class who has to make up the difference. To pay for these tax cuts, our Republican colleagues have voted to end Medicare and would force seniors to pay $6,400 more for their own care. On top of that, Republicans proposed changing Social Security, slashing its budget by over $800 million. It's an ideological agenda that chooses millionaires over the middle class.
So he has consistently fought against cutting funding for Social Security and Medicare, which is a good sign, especially for someone who's been nominated to head the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, two more things. One, if he has been able to navigate through the Democratic Party and achieve leadership positions while still having progressive policy positions, that means he's really smart. That's a very hard balancing act. Number two, corporate Democrats love identity politics. So they're like, oh, he's a Latino, that's what really matters. No, If he was a Latino that was pro bankers, it wouldn't matter at all. You'd get no credit for it. Nobody would be like, oh my God, we finally got a Latino to back billionaires. That's not a thing that any average American cares about. But if you're a Latino who is actually fighting for the average guy, well, then they can go, oh, good, that's a guy I'm proud of. And then all of a sudden, that could make a difference. But it's the policies that matter the most. And so finally, the proof's gonna be in the pudding. So we see ahead of time the direction Becerra wants to go. On half that stuff, as we all know, certainly for Medicare for all, but even the easier things to do, Biden is not on his side. So if he's just appointing him so he can play identity politics, but then shut down every one of his proposals, well, then we're gonna take away the credit because that means it was just for show. But if Becerra is actually able to make progress on these issues, well, then credit to not just Becerra, but to Biden for appointing him. So that part we don't know yet. History will tell. So looking forward to see who wins that internal fight, because guys, it's not just about getting our policies passed, which is so important for it to actually help in your real lives. That's why passing bills is the most important thing in the world. But it's also important in winning future elections. If you don't ever deliver for Americans, guess what? They won't vote for you. And establishment Democrats haven't figured that out in decades. Maybe Becerra can help them figure it out.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.